If you're an author or plan to be one, get excited because this podcast is for you. Book Marketing Mentors is the only podcast dedicated to helping you successfully market and sell your book. If you're ready for empowering conversations with successful marketing mavens, then grab a coffee or tea and listen in to your host, international best-selling author Susan Friedman.
Welcome to Book Marketing Mentors, the weekly podcast where you learn proven strategies, tools, ideas, and tips from the masters. Every week, I introduce you to a marketing master who will share their expertise to help you market and sell more books. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. And before I bring on today's guest, I want to share with you an offer that you may well be interested in, and that is a 125-point checklist to uncover profitable income streams from your book. I know that many of you are looking to make money with your book. Here are some ideas that you may not have thought about. If you would like a copy of this, then email me at susan@bookmarketingmentors.com. There's also a link below in the show notes. So make sure that you grab your copy and also subscribe to this podcast because you don't want to miss an episode of our great experts who share their wisdom with you. Now, let's get on with the show. Today, my special guest is a talented graphic designer. Growing up in the Netherlands, Lieve Maas was exposed to a lot of art thanks to her art-loving parents. Visiting galleries and museums was a favorite pastime. As long as she can remember, Lieve wanted to become a visual artist. She wanted to tell stories with visuals. However, after graduating from the Royal Art Academy in Antwerp, Belgium, Lieve became interested in graphic design. Soon she let go of her traditional oil paints and enrolled in Amsterdam's Graphic Design Academy, and then immediately after graduation landed a graphic design position with a prestigious publishing house. In 2006, love moved her to Portland, Oregon. Now being in the land of opportunity, Lieve started her own graphic design studio, Bright Light Graphics, where she offers book and brand identity design services. I was recently introduced to Lieve and was so impressed with her talent and expertise. I knew that I had to have her on the show. So Lieve, what a pleasure it is to welcome you to the show. And thank you for being this week's guest expert and mentor.
Thank you so much, Susan. I love your introduction, the land of opportunity. That's beautifully put.
Well, it really is. Both you and I are immigrants.
Right.
Just from different parts of Europe, although I'm not sure that the UK now is part of Europe, but any event, that's a whole other conversation. Let's focus in on graphic design. And I know that brand identity is really important when you work with your clients. Talk to us about the importance of that, why it is important.
I think we have to go back to the question, what is a brand anyway, to figure out why it is important. My favorite answer to the question, what a brand is, comes from Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. He says it like this. He says, your brand is what other people say about you when you are not in the room. And I tend to agree with that. It's really the impression that you make on others. And I'd actually like to venture out to say that it's bigger than that. It's the entire experience that people have with you, with your business or your book. Let's say your flavor or maybe even your essence. The reason that it is important, and this ties into what you are saying a lot, Susan, is that you want to find your niche. When you have a strong brand identity, well, first of all, you know where to place yourself, you know what your niche is, but other people will recognize that niche. Let me give you an example. Here in Central Oregon, where I live now, we have a famous local author. His name is Rick Steber. He writes most especially about the classic Wild West. These are stories from the frontier era. He himself looks the part. He is dressed like that. He lives in a forest log cabin from that era. He lives and breathes what he writes about. I met Rick Steber many years ago, and I still very clearly remember him because of his brand, really, because of that what he exudes. And if you go to his website or his social media, it's really clear that that's all him. That's really the reason why a brand is very important, not only for businesses, but also for authors.
Yeah, that's a great example. And of course, I could just visualize what he looked like there. But, this isn't for everyone. I mean, you've got more conservative type authors. How might they build a brand? What might be something that could help them stand out from the crowd?
Yeah, certainly. You don't need to dress up in a particular way. Let's take the example of the more conservative author. I think figuring out first what the best platform is to let your voice be heard. Let's say LinkedIn, for example. LinkedIn is a platform that is very business-like, so to speak. If you, as an author, add your voice to the mix, make sure that it's truly your voice, that it's your message that you are expressing. If you're more conservative, sharing more conservative views or opinions or stories or ideas might be appropriate. The same with platforms that are more visually oriented, like Instagram, for example, or even Facebook. Those places are perfect to share information, stories, blog posts that tie into your own values and your own ideas that are maybe interesting for your audience to share. So you always want to make sure that you connect with your audience through your stories and through your particular voice.
Yeah, stories are so important. And I know how storytelling it's always been there, but somehow now it's really gotten into corporate America, and people are wanting to tie their stories in with their brands. That's very powerful. And again, like you said, it makes you more memorable when you can remember a story or just a graphic. I think one of the things too that you're saying is consistency, how that is important, not only being who you are, but being consistent in your message and how you appear in the marketplace. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. If you look at social media, for example, social media is incredibly loud. Everybody is vying for everybody's attention. It becomes difficult to stand out. And I think that's really not the point. It's not the point to be the loudest, the biggest, the largest, etc. I think it's about figuring out who your audience is, what they are inspired by and interested in and looking for, and then sharing stories that match that interest. Also, think about how for many, many centuries, we humans, we got together and we share stories. So it's something that's built into our humanity, into our DNA. Stories are there to be shared with each other. Some people will not be interested in your stories. That's fine. Those are not the people that you have to connect with. But other stories, other people will be interested in you and what you have to say. Then you have a natural audience.
And it goes back to what you said originally, too, the whole idea of having a niche market, because I know you're right. I mean, there's always somebody who's going to be bigger and louder than you are on social media. It's sort of one of the reasons I don't like it, because everybody's shouting out so loudly, trying to get noticed. And it's sort of a zoo as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, within your target market and within your niche market, then if you can add something to that, if you can acknowledge their challenges, and maybe you've got solutions that you can offer for their challenges. I think that's important. Color is something that comes up a lot. Talk to us about the importance of color as it relates to your brand.
Boy, I could talk about that the whole day about color. Because in a way, of course, color is very subjective. We all see color in slightly different ways. That's just simply what that is about. If I want to talk about color in terms of your brand colors, then it is important to pay attention to that. When you create a brand, when you have a brand identity, there will always be a handful of colors really that fit that brand. It's a good idea to stick within that scheme. I want to go back again to the idea of what a brand is. And there's a difference between a brand and visual identity. Visual identity is actually all the expressions of your brand that you can play with. Let's say it's all the brand colors and it's specific photography that you use or specific icons that you use. That is visual identity. Everything that you put out there, as in, let's say, a flyer or a Facebook post or whatever it is that you put out there to attract people's attention, you should be thinking about these are all little pieces of your brand that you are putting out. So yeah, sticking with the colors that fit your brand is a real good idea. It's one of the ways to be consistent in your visual expression.
Yes, and I'm assuming that it would matter whether your audience is male, female, young, older, that there are colors that would attract or detract your target.
Yeah, definitely. If you think about book genres, then you can see that pretty clearly as well. There are particular colors. For example, financial books, you'll see a lot of blue. Blue tends to be a color that comes across here, at least in our Western society. Blue comes across as a color that's trustworthy and that's balanced and that's rational. When you go to, for example, spiritual books, you will see more purple, maybe more pink. Those are more, I would say, quote unquote, spiritual colors. But I'm sure that you get the idea that if you want to be on topic and on target, and you're trying to figure out the best colors for your brand identity or for your book cover, then it's always good to go to a bookstore or an online bookstore and check out the overall color schemes that are being used for the different book genres.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love looking at book covers and how they vary so differently and what stands out. Like you could have a completely white cover with just one word on there, and that has got such impact. It's like you wouldn't think it would, but it does.
Yeah, it can. Yeah.
How about having your picture on the front cover? I've got a few authors who say, I want to have my photo on there. What's your thought about that? Because I've got some very strong thoughts about that, but I'd love to hear it from you.
My initial response is, if you are not a celebrity, then having your picture on your book cover, I wouldn't do it. On the back cover, absolutely. I always find that very pleasant when an author has an author picture on the back so that I can see who that person is. But on the front, I would steer away from that. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well,
Yeah.
we agree on that because I say exactly the same thing. I mean, if you're a Michelle Obama, absolutely, that is going to sell your book.
Yeah.
Her book Becoming. I mean, I can just see her right on the cover. It's a gorgeous picture. That obviously helps to sell her book because she's such a visual personality. But if you're an unknown, you're right. I mean, I think it's more of an ego boost than anything else.
Yeah. Or maybe when you're writing an autobiography, for example, and you have a very old photograph that somehow can be folded into a larger image, like a Photoshop compilation of a variety of images, then it could make sense, but usually not so much.
Let's talk about mistakes. Our listeners love mistakes, and I'm sure you could probably write a book about mistakes with regard to brand identity, graphic design. Give us a few of the common ones, Lieve.
Well, I have had actually a big challenge with a former client about photographs that she was very attached to, that she wanted to have on her website. As a graphic designer, I can do a lot in Photoshop, but I cannot do magic, right? There is a limit to what it is that I can do. This former client, she had photographs that were very low quality. So they were very fuzzy and pixelated and not good colors, etc. She wanted me to fix them. Now, like I said, I'm limited in what I can do. If I start with bad imagery, I cannot make good imagery from something that's not good in the first place. I couldn't work with that, but that became very problematic for her. One of the biggest mistakes is that people bring photographs, images that are simply too low resolution to place inside books or on a cover. A lot of people do DIY, do-it-yourself covers. They'll use images that are not good, that are technically not sound, never mind whether they are good and appropriate in terms of visuals. But yeah, starting out with technically unsound images, that's one of the big mistakes that people make.
Yeah, I can imagine that trying to make something of something that is bad quality, yes, that's got to be really tough, of course. And as you say, you can't produce magic.
Yeah.
What else?
There's another thing that comes to mind. Because there are a lot of options to create your own book, as in doing your own layout, etc., which it saves a lot of money, and I absolutely get that. Creating a book interior, doing book design is an actual craft. You actually need to know what you're doing. So think about typography. Typography is called the hidden art. It's hidden because you only notice when something's off. If you read a book and you don't want to read it anymore, when the lines are too wide, if the font size is too small, if the font is off, etc. A lot of people that I've seen create their own book interiors and then upload them to KDP and have their book printed. And then they become actually unreadable because the interior is just not well laid out, because they've either done it themselves or let the interior design, they hired somebody who doesn't know what they do, etc. So here again, there are limits to the technical aspects of the book design of the products that you put out.
It's interesting that you talk about that typography. First of all, I love looking at different fonts. I think they're amazing how many hundreds of fonts that there are, probably thousands. And it's interesting that you say, that you might put down a book because of the font. And I hadn't thought about it like that, but I know that if there's too much on a page, it's just like an email. If somebody sends me one block of written text, I have such a hard time to read it. Often, unless I really, really have to, I just ignore it or, try and scan it, but it just puts me off. Or I have to take it and I have to break it down into so that there's white space. I mean, people don't understand the fact that white space is important.
That's right. White space, it really has to do with how our eyes take in information and how then our brains process that information. Again, here, not everybody is able to look at text in the same way. Think about people who are dyslexic, for example. They look at text in a completely different way. But yeah, rule of thumb for sure is for book interior design and typography that for big text, long text, you use specific letter types that are easier to read, and you make sure that the text block, they call that, the width of the lines, that it's not too wide because your eye gets lost. And at some point, it's just too hard. So you'll put the book to the side and not pick it up anymore. There are so many good books out there, but if they're not being read because of poor typography, that's sad.
Now, I know there used to be, everything was either in Times Roman or Helvetica.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think those are sort of old hat now or not. What are the trendy fonts that people use?
The trendy fonts, I personally don't really go with particular trendy fonts. But for book interior design, I usually use Minion Pro, which is a beautiful, easy to read letter type. Garamond is another one that is more classic. Those are tried and true letter types that I think, especially when you're creating a book, it's good to go with those tried and true letters. They're easy to read, easy for the eye. You can go and do something fun with the headers, for example. Don't go too crazy with them. Think about, for example, a script letter. Script letter is as if somebody has written the letter by hand. Script letters are quite difficult to read. They're okay for headers, but as long as they're not longer than a couple of words, I'd stay away from them.
Actually, I was going to ask you about script because I know that sometimes it's very difficult to read. And especially if people put it on, let's say, their PowerPoint presentation, it works well as a header because it's different. But to have more than that, it makes it very hard to read.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. Any of these sort of curly-whirly fonts.
That's right. There is this interesting study that I read about a while ago where it is true that these curly fonts are difficult to read, but it actually slows readers down. And with that, a reader needs to take a little bit more time to almost decipher what is being written there. In terms of headers or in terms for, let's say, a Facebook post with a couple of words, like a poignant quote or something like that, then those more difficult to read letter types could actually be helpful because they slow people down and they have to read a little bit slower. By doing that, the information sinks in a little bit deeper. There's a place for these type of fonts, but you need to know what you're doing to get the full effect.
And is there a limit to how many different kinds of fonts you should use at any one time?
Yes, I would say 2.
2, yeah, that's what I'd heard.
Yeah, when I create a book interior, I use a very simple, like I say, for example, Minion Pro, which is a serif font, as they call that, the letter type with the little, how do you say that? Little
tail. It's like a little tail, yeah.
That's right. And that guides the eyes to the next word. And then for the headers, a lot of the times I use a sans serif font, like Avenir, for example, which is a very kind of almost blocky, very clean font. The sans serif font is, again, great for headers and very short pieces. Then, of course, you can alternate. For example, if I were to lay out a quote inside a book, like a pull quote, I would use the same font, like Minion, but then put that in italics. I'll use 2 different letter types, but I would be changing between italic and regular and bold, for example.
Yeah, because italic sometimes makes it look like a different font, but it actually isn't. So it fits in really well. That's fascinating. I love that. And thanks for sharing those different types of fonts, the names of them, because that's very helpful. I think for people to know and understand, this is not even a drop in the ocean, but at least having a couple that people can relate to, especially when you've got all those choices in Word, for instance, or even in your PowerPoint presentations. I'm always looking for different type fonts to put together. So
Yeah.
I love having fun with that. And then if somebody uses a font in a presentation and it's what I haven't seen before and I like, then I go scouting to see if I can find it on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there is this one particular website that I like. It's called typewolf.com, and they give information about font pairing, for example. That's really useful if you are going to lay out your book interior, for example, yourself, or you're creating Facebook posts or whatever it is where you want to do something interesting with fonts, but you want to be sure that you're doing it correctly. Then going to places where they give information about font pairing is actually a good idea.
Like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to get a visit from me. I
Good.
know that. And that's Type Wolf, as in the animal, WOLF.
That's right. Yeah.
Typewolf.com. Excellent. Well, this has been fabulous. And Lieve, if our listeners wanted to find out more about you and your services, how could they do that?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. My website is called brightlightgraphics.com, brightlightgraphics.com. People can go to my website, obviously, and just cruise around on my website. I also have a book, which is called From Manuscript to Published Book, and it is available on Amazon. It's I call it a straightforward guide to self-publishing. That's mostly what I help people with. I help people to design their book, and I step them through the self-publishing process.
Fabulous. If they don't come with Aviva Publishing, of course, which I know some of them do. So we've shared a few clients, so I know that. That's fabulous.
I do not publish people myself. I help them kind of navigate the dark forests of self-publishing.
Yes, I know, the jungle.
Yeah.
The 1,000-piece puzzle.
That's right.
It really is. It's unbelievable how many pieces there are that you have to put together before you can see the picture of what's going on. So, Lieve, if you were to leave our listeners with a golden nugget, what would that be?
I would want to say it's no rocket science. The whole self-publishing is no rocket science. And I mean that about the process, so the process between manuscript and published book. The other piece would be that if you are going through great lengths of publishing your book and putting money into that effort, then it would only make sense that you also focus on your book marketing. Book marketing is a whole other beast, and there are a lot of different avenues to walk there as well, and a lot of people who are able to support you in that. But it's really a good idea to focus on the book marketing, because your book is not going to be found by itself. You really need to share that with the world.
Absolutely. And, you know, as we do in Aviva Publishing, we've got a course, Author Marketing Mastery, that exactly takes authors through that, because they've put so much time, energy, money into producing the book itself. But if it can't get found, as you rightly say, what use is it? Yes, I certainly agree with you. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. This has been fabulous. And thank you all, listeners, for taking time out of your precious day to listen to this interview. And I sincerely hope that it sparked some ideas you can use to sell more books. Here's wishing you much book and author marketing success. And before I sign off completely for today, remember the 121-point checklist to uncover profitable income streams for your book. Email me at susan@bookmarketingmentors.com. It's in the show notes as well, the link. Get your copy. See you next week.
The time is now to take action and finally build your book-selling empire. And the great news is that Susan is here to help you. Visit bookmarketingmentors.com and sign up for a free 15-minute book marketing strategy session with Susan. She'll help you discover your first steps to marketing and selling your book. Only those who take action are rewarded, so visit bookmarketingmentors.com, and we'll see you again next week.